distinguished speakers, members of the Academy and Policy Community, colleagues from media, and friends of the India International Center. On behalf of the India International Center, it's a privilege to welcome you to this important book discussion on Seeds of Hate, Bangladesh's Extremist Surge, a volume that addresses one of the most urgent and complex challenges confronting South Asia today: the persistence and mutation of religious extremism and its implications for democracy, pluralism, and regional stability. The India International Center has long been committed to fostering serious public discourse on issues that shape our political and moral landscape. Today's discussion is very much in that tradition. The rise of extremist ideologies in Bangladesh is not merely a national concern, it carries profound consequences for the region, for India's neighborhood policy, and for the broader global struggle to uphold democratic values against radicalization and sectarian violence. Seeds of the Hate is both timely and unsettling. Edited by Shahriar, Kabir, and Dipanjan Chaudhury, the volume brings together rigorous scholarship and grounded journalistic inquiry to examine how radical organizations, most notably Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, have embedded themselves within political, educational, and social institutions. The book traces historical continuities from the violence of the 1971 Liberation War to contemporary networks of the radicalization, while also mapping the transnational linkages that sustain extremist movements today. What makes this work particularly compelling is its refusal to simplify. It interrogates ideology, organization, and geopolitics with equal seriousness, offering insights that are essential for policymakers, scholars, journalists, and all those concerned with peace and democratic resilience in South Asia. We are honored to have with us an exceptionally distinguished panel whose collective experience spans diplomacy, national security, journalism, policy research, and regional expertise. The discussion will be moderated by Shri Dipanjan Chaudhury, diplomatic editor of the Economic Times and co-editor of the volume. A seasoned foreign affairs journalist, Shri Chaudhury has reported extensively on conflict zones, insurgencies, and high-level diplomacy across South Asia and beyond. His reporting is marked by depth, field experience, and a rare ability to connect regional developments with global strategic shifts. Welcome, Mr. Chaudhury. We are privileged to hear first from Shri M.J. Akbar, one of the India's most influential journalists and public intellectuals with a career spanning over 4 decades. Shri Akbar has played a formative role in shaping modern Indian journalism, a former Minister of State for External Affairs and the founder editor of several landmark publications. His insights bridge history, diplomacy, and the evolving media landscape. Welcome, Mr. Joining him is Ambassador Pankaj Saran, member of the National Security Advisor Board and one of India's foremost diplomats, a former High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Ambassador to Russia, and Deputy National Security Advisor. Ambassador Saran brings unmatched strategic and diplomatic perspective to questions of regional security and India's engagement with its neighborhood. Welcome, Ambassador Saran. We also have Dr. Anirban Ganguly, chairman of the Dr. Syama Prasad Mookerjee Research Foundation, a leading public policy thinker. Dr. Ganguly has been instrumental in building the foundation into a globally recognized think tank with significant contributions to research on political thought, national security, and strategic affairs. Welcome, Dr. Ganguly. Completing this distinguished panel is Dr. Smruti Pattanaik, Research Fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and one of India's most respected scholars on Bangladesh and South Asian security. With extensive academic publications, international fellowships, and teaching engagement across the region, Dr. Pattanaik's work offers nuanced, evidence-based understanding of political and security dynamics in Bangladesh. Welcome, Dr. Pattanaik. Together, this panel brings not consensus, but clarity, not rhetoric, but rigor. Their perspectives promise a discussion that is analytically rich, historically grounded, and policy relevant. With these words, I warmly welcome all of you to today's discussion. And before I invite Shri Dipanjan Chaudhury, may I invite Professor Hindol Sen Gupta for his initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Ushaji. This is the first publication of this year of Grin. So on behalf of both the founders, Rishi Suri and myself, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome all of you to this publication. When we were planning this publication with Dipanjan, we of course realized how important this would be, and we are particularly saddened, of course, that one of the authors of this book is in prison, as it so happens, in Bangladesh, Shahriar Kabir. So we cannot but remember him and we wish him the very best, and may he return to freedom very soon. And we have this wonderful panel discussing one of the most important issues in the Indian subcontinent at this point in time. And I can think of no better person than Dipanjan to really put this all together, hold it together. And we are really looking forward to hearing from all of these people, each one of them an expert, beginning, of course, with Mr. Akbar. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. On behalf of Grin, I welcome you to this book release. And thanks very much, the Indian National Centre, once again, for partnering with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Shaji, for accepting this proposal to have a discussion on this, and Indian National Centre taking ownership of this. It was a subject which I must admit to Hindol and Rishi here, which few publishers refused to touch. I mean, and they're Indian publishers, and they felt that they could be under threat. Although I didn't understand why could they be threat here from radicals not present in the country and didn't have a kind of foothold here. But Rishi and Hindol were bold, and they were willing to publish this. So first, a big thank you to you. And I understand this book is going to be distributed by Penguin. So Penguin has taken the onus of distributing this, and the book will also be available on Amazon after this launch. So this book was conceived a few months after the unfortunate incidents of August 2024. And it was sort of germinated from some of my thoughts. And because I have been at the receiving end of Jamaat-e-Islami in the past, and also probably the would-be Prime Minister of Bangladesh if the BNP wins. I mean, they have also not been very kind to me in the past. But so that maybe Shahriar Kabir, I think, needs no introduction to some of our former High Commissioners sitting here. High Commissioner Dev Mookerjee, Ambassador Ganguly Dash, High Commissioner Veena Sikri, and Ambassador Pankaj Saran. He represents a committee called Ghatuk Dalal Nirmul Committee, who has fought all his life selflessly. I mean, he's not one of the person who can be labeled. Of course, his allegiance lies with Army League, but he cannot be labeled as one of the corrupt or somebody who believed in nepotism in Bangladesh politics. He has often found himself behind bars whenever a non-Army League government came to power. And once the events unfolded in August 2024, Shahriar Kabir was one of those who immediately found himself behind bar. He has not been unwell for many, many years. Yet, I mean, there was no mercy which was shown to him. And over the last decade, even during the Awami League rule in Bangladesh, Shahriar Kabir had conducted a monumental study. And this book is actually from that study, which was, of course, done in Bangla. And because my mother tongue is in Bangla and I could read and could put it together and translate into English, there was somebody who helped me in that process. Probably I had invited her, but she's not here. She is a professional translator called Amrita Bera. She earlier worked with the Delhi government. So she also put a lot of effort in culling this out. And then we did a lot of historical research from various libraries, including Indian National Centre Library, of getting the material on Jamaat-e-Islami and associated groups, including Hifazat-Islam, Khilafat Majlis, and others. So this book is a combination of the 5 principal radical groups in Bangladesh. Of course, Jamaat-e-Islami is the one who has been in the mainstream, fought elections, won seats, and they're again going to contest elections on February 12th. It also refers to the links that Jamaat-e-Islami had with Muslim Brotherhood in certain countries, in certain parts of the world, and how that ideology has influenced Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh. The book also elaborates on that. And this is not somebody's narrative per se, somebody's fiction ideas per se. This is a book which is based on facts, on Shahriar Kabir's and his team's study. Even when Awami League government was in power, they went to each and every religious seminary, each and every institution. So it was on the field study with a lot of open source information from the Bangladesh media. Not every media was pro-government, not every media journalist was pro-government, but it contains references. So therefore, largely it is on the field research which has been put together. And in my humble opinion, it's a seminal work in terms of, to give a reference work in terms of the trends of radicalism that we see currently in Bangladesh in play in the last 1.5 years. Of course, its genesis was, it was never killed while Bangladesh became an independent country in 1971, and there are much more qualified people to talk about it. So to launch and to have a discussion on this, we have 4 eminent people who have devoted their life to this and on regional security. We have Mr. M.J. Akbar, Ambassador Pankaj, Saran, Dr. Anirban, Ganguly, and Dr. Pattanaik. May I ask Mr. Akbar to begin? And I won't take much time. So if he has 10 to 15 minutes to kind of give his idea about Bangladesh and radical Islam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dipanjan. Thank you very much. Great pleasure to see all of you, because I think what we are going to discuss today will require a very, some insight and some proper understanding of the forces that shape our subcontinent, the historical forces that shape our subcontinent. And that is what I hope to dwell on in the few minutes allotted to me by our pleasant dictator. By the way, before I start, may I take an issue with the title of this book? Please do not use the word radical for regressive forces. Radical forces represent something very different in the history of ideas. Radical forces which are progressive, they may not be acceptable by the status quo, but they inspire change, they inspire thinking, facts. They may in fact be ahead of facts. Right. Regressive forces are those that take you back into an artificial past. And that is what the Jamaat is doing, and that is what I hope to dwell on. Also, just on a personal note, I hope Shahriar is freed. We've known him for a long while, and let's hope the return of democracy will mean that. But your own threats that you referred to, one thing history teaches you, that the past is static, but all change belongs to the future. So let's hope that the change is more positive than Bangladesh is going through what can be described as an existential crisis. This is not a challenge to a government alone. If it was simply a challenge to even the Awami League government, we could have dealt with it in the normal analysis that we have, because democracy is really the right to change governments, not to re-elect them. Despots and dictators want to be re-elected in some form or the other. Democracy is the right to change governments. And if this had been a change of government in the democratic process, we wouldn't be here, and I don't think we'd be publishing this book. What this represents is a challenge to the very idea of 1971. And that is what makes this a very seminal point in the history. To understand that, we have to also realize who was defeated in 1971. A defeat of the Pakistani army is the only known case of 93,000 soldiers surrendering their arms. And I often wonder why. I assume it is because they never believed in the cause they were fighting for. But that apart, the 1971 represents a defeat of what might be called, or not might be called, what are the forces that created the idea of partition. The idea of partition was built around, within the limitations of time, one has to use a bit of shorthand. But the idea of partition was built around one very important fact that you must understand about the Pakistan movement led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The Muslim League never fought for the freedom of India from the British. It only wanted freedom of some Muslims from Hindus. That was the raison d'etre of the Muslim League movement. And that Muslim League movement, whether it has suffered setback or it has established itself as a state, retains the power of some support elsewhere. And in Bangladesh, while it was defeated in 1971, that did not mean that it evaporated. Those forces were waiting for an opportunity. The other force that was defeated in 1971, as those of you who have followed the history would know, is, and remember that the Sixth Fleet's arrival very nearly became an important factor in the course of the war. So the forces of what I call Richard Nixon were defeated also in 1971. But the American interest, whether it is in Pakistan or whether it is what was then East Pakistan and today Bangladesh, is not ideological. The American interest is mainly strategic, as those of us who followed the news over the last few days and few weeks who know only too well. So the Americans, their strategic interests are very well defined. They will do anything for another base, another military base. And that way, for them, Pakistan was a comfort source. If I may just take a minute extra from your allotted time, it is very important to understand the nature of the India-America relationship. India and America, at least in my view, will always be friends because they have absolutely no reason for enmity. There's never been a war between them, never will be. We have never been on opposite sides, including of a war. But we can never be allies. The reason why we cannot be allies is because 1947, an accident of history determined the course of our foreign relations and determined the course of our ideologies. In 1947, India became the first country in history to reverse colonization. In fact, America was there before that, but that was in an earlier age. And therefore, India understood that there is a difference between freedom and independence. All countries after post-colonization phase were free, but not all were independent. And India understood. The first creator of a foreign policy, Jawaharlal Nehru, made this very clear, that the defense of the idea of independence and strategic autonomy was very critical to the nature of policy, and that still exists. Pakistan, on the other hand, its foreign policy was defined by the Jinnah Doctrine, which has actually established, it's there in the records. I'm not creating anything that has not been confirmed by Jinnah's own papers and his own correspondence. When he said that the freedom of Pakistan has to be protected from India, which he meant quote unquote Hindu India, he never recognized the idea of secularism, he couldn't. That has to be protected, and for that I need an ally. I need a power. Russia would never be my friend because Russia is a communist and atheist country. They will never understand Islam. Britain and France are too weak. America is the only. In 1946, he sent his friend Isfahani to America to establish the first relationship with America. And Isfahani, by the way, sent some very wise advice. He says, if you want to woo the Americans, right, learn how to talk. It's still true. And they want to hear the right things. The idea of Pakistan, the weakness of in my view, the idea of Pakistan does not lie in its people. The people of Pakistan are the same as the people of India. We are as good or as bad. The idea of Pakistan lies in a fallacy that religion can be the basis of nationalism. And in particular, that Islam, or for that matter, any religion, can be the basis of nationalism. That is something that has been historically and proven to be completely wrong. If you look at the record of Islam, I'll just put it again in shorthand. If Islam had been sufficient as a basis of nationalism, why would there be 22 Arab countries? They have both Islam, Sunnism, and a language in common. But a nation is created by human beings. Religion is given by God or our idea of God. Islam lives in a mosque. Islam doesn't live in a nation. Nowhere in the Quran is Allah described as Rabbul Muslimin, or the God of Muslims. He's Rabbul Alameen. He's the God of the whole universe, of the whole Brahmakand, as every religion has. And the Quran itself says, Lakum dinakum wa iliya din, your faith for you, my faith for me. And get on with the rest of life. Hold on to your faith, but get on to it. But this fallacy that religion could be the basis of nationalism is one that has been proven historically to be weak, fundamental. And in fact, I was just mentioning over tea that the man who was an intellectual who reminded uh, people was Ayatollah Khomeini in 1971, who went on record and asked, how is Islam going to come to terms with Iranian nationalism? And in the end, Iranian nationalism has prevailed over Islamism. Just now, the Taliban of Afghanistan reminded Pakistan that Islam is not the basis of national relationships. So this important difference, the history of what became, by the way, whenever we think of the British, you must remember that the basis of their empire was intellectual and economic fraud, or intellectual fraud and economic exploitation. And part of the intellectual fraud was to sell the term that they actually gave India democracy. Nonsense. The 1946 elections, only 8% of the country had, 9% of the country had the vote, because only ratepayers and those who paid taxes had the vote. Not only that, they had votes in separate electorates. In the modern era of nation states, which really begins in 1918, 1919, with the creation of the post-empire age, the civilizational state has proved to be the state which survives despite turbulence. Turbulence is created by people who are in it, sometimes work hard. Egypt is a classic example of a civilizational state. And therefore, Egypt never abandons its past. The Iranians don't abandon their past. 3 weeks ago, there was a public rally against Israel in Tehran, and the large image that they used was of Darius's or Xerxes' son, the Roman emperor kneeling behind them, in front of them. They are proud of their past as Iranians. This is pre-Islamic. The idea that the basis then of there is culture and history, civilizational. The idea that history begins with the arrival of a religion is a nonsense. And no civilizational state accepts it. Of course, we all believe in our faith with the greatest amount of devotion and honesty. But we cannot deny that our language, the Arab language, is much older than Arab Islam. Bengali is much older. And this, in 1971, you had the return, or you had the formation of culture as the basis of the nation state in Bengal. The only threat, in fact, worry should have been whether West Bengal was ever going to be taken into this cultural space or not. Right? That's a separate story. The fact is that the idea that you could turn, and therefore, within 30 years of Islam being used in order to create a country, heaven knows how many miles apart, right, had to crack on the basis of human behavior. The people who believed that Islam could be the basis did not accept defeat in 71, and they have shown the pace, and they have been helped by forces. If you want to understand what is happening today, again, very quickly, I'm very conscious of my today. You must remember that in maybe 2007, 8, maybe Pankaj will have a better memory of the date, where the idea of the -2 theory was first proposed and brought into play in Bangladesh. That yes, we can form a government without either of the two women, because both, when you consider the future, you must remember one thing about the BNP. The BNP was part of the Bengali liberation movement. If there are two starting points, then the first starting point is the speech on the radio by Major Zia, 23rd of March, and 16th of December is the culmination of that. So the BNP does represent part of the same historical experience. We all hope that the return of democracy in Bangladesh will be a two-stage process. First stage will be the present elections, and then perhaps another election which will include all parties, all legitimate parties. In fact, all parties should be there. And then the democratic process can be. So Bengal is going to live, the future of Bengal is going to be built on Bengali. Those who don't understand the power of Bengali, even those in Delhi who do not understand the power of Bengali, will never come to terms with Bengal's emotional power. They will never come to terms with Bengal's even sense of aesthetics, with Bengal's separate idea, or idea of religion itself. Bengal doesn't have gods; it has goddesses, and it's very important to remember that. Right? I think that perhaps on that note, we leave you with some things to think about. But I only do want to insist that I'm extremely happy I have watched Bangladesh swerve with the assassination of Sheikh Mujib, drift into army rule, drift out of army rule through great anger, assassinations, tragedy, and so much turmoil. But each time, through the challenges, the civilizational power of Bengal has always prevailed. And I'm absolutely confident that it will prevail again. Thank you for this book, because this book documents the past through those who have created the past. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Akbar, for your, precise, concise, and the brilliant exposition of the civilization and the culture and ethos. May I now invite Mr. Pankaj Saran for the audience here. Mr. Saran wrote the foreword for this book. He was very kind enough to write the foreword for this book. And I must also acknowledge the presence of a few other friends, the Ambassador of Argentina, the Ambassador of Egypt, the Ambassador of Italy here, Ambassador Burma, member of the NSAB, and former Ambassador of Russia, and my friends from the Uzbek embassy and other friends from other embassies. Thank you. Thank you so much for being supportive. And Roman, the Deputy Ambassador of Russia in Federation to India. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dipanjan, for inviting me for this very eventful launch of the book. All the distinguished audience sitting here reflects the importance they attach to what we are discussing. And after Mr. M.J. Akbar's Tour de Horizon, I feel extremely insufficient to speak, because I have known him and learnt a lot from him. And if any of you have followed his work, he's an author of many, many books, and extremely knowledgeable as an historian and otherwise. And I've also had the privilege of receiving him in Dhaka a couple of times when I was High Commissioner. I also want to, recognize Ambassador Veena Sikri, Ambassador Riva Das, both contemporary or both colleagues in Dhaka. So the first point I want to make is that I think the timing of the book is very important. It could not have been better. because we are at a stage where in a few weeks from now, Bangladesh is almost certainly going to decide the next twist in its journey as a nation, and therefore timing is very important. Secondly, it is extremely tragic that Shahriar Kabir is in prison. Frankly, there is no reason for him to be in prison, because if the current dispensation in Dhaka believes in individual freedoms, in the virtues of democracy and liberty, then the last thing that should have been done is to have put someone like Shahriar Kabir behind bars. I don't think there is any justification for his plight today and for the plight of many others like him who have a certain view about their country, about their society, which may not accord with the current system, but that is no reason for them to be imprisoned. Thirdly, I think this really is also a moment of reflection, as Mr. Akbar has adequately done. I'll just add a little bit to it as a practitioner, not so much as a scholar. One of the lessons we've learned from the history of Bangladesh is that the identity issue has never been finally settled once and for all. If you look at the last 50, 60 years, every time one force or the other has tried to dominate and tried to wipe out the counter force, it does not succeed. And so today, when we have a situation where there is a swing of the pendulum to another extreme, and the attempt is to wipe out what was there 2 years ago from the landscape, socially, intellectually, culturally, of Bangladesh, if you look at the history, it will tell you this attempt is not going to succeed. The idea that you can wipe out or erase a certain viewpoint in Bangladesh by sheer force or capture or elite capture of the institutions, which is what I think has happened in the last 1.5 years, is not going to succeed. So for all of those people in Bangladesh who do not subscribe to the ideology of the current setup, and there are tens of millions of such people, they are the silent majority, and they are waiting for their turn to pronounce themselves and to speak up. This is not the time or the opportunity for them, but it does not mean that this group or this section of the population does not exist. But then that brings us to the question of what exactly is the fate of this piece of land which we call Bangladesh. I have had the privilege of traveling across the length and breadth of the country and interacting with a wide cross-section of people. I've dealt with Jamaat leaders when I was there the first time in between 1989 to 1992. And I have seen periods which were bad for India also, in Dhaka, where we were treated almost like an enemy state. But I've also seen the period under the previous government, where the same country, the same people, the same institutions was a different country. And so these swings, the extreme swings within Bangladesh, are something which I think as Indians we really have to accept. The idea that there can be incremental changes in Bangladesh or orderly changes in Bangladesh is an aspirational goal, but I think the reality is different. And if you look at every single change of power in Bangladesh since 1970, so the first election, what we see is that every transfer of power has been violent, has been very turbulent for the country. And whenever there has been an election, on the rare occasion, then the winning side or the winning party believes that it is its prerogative and it's its natural right to occupy the full political space, leave no space for the political opposition, and preferably also to decimate the political opposition. The big question today is whether Bangladesh can break away from that past and make a new beginning for itself within its own polity, its own identity. Experience of the last 1.5 years shows that we are unfortunately repeating the same cycle. Someone just shared with me a comment made by a very senior retired Bangladeshi military officer lamenting exactly what I've just said, that what began as a promise on the 5th of August, allegedly, of a new Bangladesh, of the emergence of the voice of the youth, today has been perverted, and once again the political space seems to have been captured by the old guard. And in this case, the old guard is basically the BNP and the Jamaat. So, can we be optimistic about the political stability of Bangladesh, or of the idea that you can have a genuinely inclusive society which is tolerant of each other? At this point in time, looks again challenging, and which is, of course, something which we have to worry about. On the next steps for Bangladesh, I really believe that Bangladesh has to come to terms with the reality of India, and that it has to live with India. And this aspect of its coexistence with India is understood by the vast majority of the people. But again, because of the politics, the nature of the politics of the country, people there are trying to fight this geographical, historical, and cultural reality. I am personally optimistic that you cannot beyond a point fight these realities, and that's at some stage the reality of peaceful coexistence with India will have to prevail. For us, and as Mr. Akbar has said, the use of Islam in the politics of Bangladesh did not begin in 2024. It began with Ziaur Rahman. In fact, as of course, I'm not even talking about the partition which began it all. But even after 1971, you had Ziaur Rahman, and then Ershad, and then Begum Khaleda Zia. So all of them, in their own ways, played with the constitution, introduced the idea of the Islamic personality of Bangladesh. But yet, despite all of that, you still did not have a completely Islamized society in Bangladesh in terms of its political characteristics. You still have a situation where the Jamaat cannot actually command more than a small proportion or a percentage of the population or the popular vote. The only way they can do that is through elite capture, which they have done in the last 1.5 years. In the middle of all of this, what we find is the impact of these developments on India's security, on India's society. And having lived there and spoken to a lot of people and seen firsthand, it is quite clear that in many ways, the impact of the partition in the East for India was in some ways much worse than the impact of the partition in the West, for many reasons, including geography and the culture. And therefore, what happens in Bangladesh does not stay in Bangladesh. It trickles out and it spreads across the borders into India. And this is something we have to recognize as Indians. We don't know which way this election is going to go, but there are some aspects of the election which are well known already. And the first, of course, and the most obvious is that, for better or for worse, one of the main political parties has been kept out. of the election process. And by definition, that's not a good thing. If the claim is that we are restoring democracy, we want political reform, we don't want to repeat the past, we want to start from scratch, then you owe it to the people of the country to allow them the choice of different ideologies, different political formations. So this election, by definition, will be deficient in the sense that it will not have the inclusion or the participation of a huge or a large section of the Bangladeshi political opinion. The stakes for India are very high in what happens. We have had a difficult period in the last 1.5 years with the relationship under the present system, under the present regime in Dhaka. In many ways, this election is also new, untested, for many reasons. I mean, firstly, of course, the Awami is not a part of it. Secondly, the BNP is under a new leadership. And thirdly, the Jamaat is right up there, recognized and legitimized as a political force. And most importantly, from my point of view, the biggest change is that the nature of the electorate has changed fundamentally. We really do not have a conclusive idea or a definitive idea about how an 18-year-old Bangladeshi today is going to vote and what he thinks of this whole paradox or this dichotomy between India and Pakistan, and how much does he see himself as a genuine Bangladeshi, not as a descendant of Pakistan or a descendant of India. This is really important because he actually has not expressed or shown his hand so far. So this is that full new generation of young Bangladeshis who are going to, for the first time, express themselves. And so, to that extent, this is a new territory for everyone. I just hope that the book and all the evidence that has been recorded there is not translated into intolerance to an extent where it has transborder effects. We don't want any export of revolution or Islamic radical Islam from Bangladesh into India. We have huge stakes in making sure that there is a degree of tolerance in that society. And I think it seems to me that the Indian authorities are watching very eagerly on what is going to happen and will calibrate their actions depending on what happens in the election. External powers, as Mr. Akbar has said, have always had a role to play. I mean, from my point of view, the most consequential powers in Bangladesh have been the United States, the UK, Pakistan, China, and increasingly, I think in the last many years, Turkey. So we need to see which way these powers operate. But it has to be said that the criticality of Bangladesh to India's security and vital interests is unquestioned, and I don't think stands to much discussion. So it's very good that we have this book. Someone has to record the reality, put the material out there in public for everyone to see. Because what I hear from people in Dhaka is that there is another degree of intolerance and hostility that is evident today, which is impacting freedom of speech, freedom of the media, freedom of expression, and so there is. So we are swinging from one extreme to another. To what extent this election can correct this imbalance remains to be seen. My only last point, I'll stop here, is that if you look at the east of India and if you look at other Islamic societies and nations, whether it's Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, you actually do not see the sway of of radical Islam governing those societies. So, if Bangladesh were to try to re-engineer its society in the mirror image of other nations and societies on the west of India, then it will actually be going against the grain of the kind of societies that exist on the eastern side of India, on Southeast Asia, and so on. The culture there, the tradition there is much more homogeneous and cosmopolitan. So we'll see how the Jamaat performs in this election. Of course, there is a new Jamaat. They admitted themselves, which is again a function of the new generation in Bangladesh, of the young generation. So they want to detach themselves from the stigma of 1971. So in a sense, they're trying to reinvent. But how much they will be able to establish their own Bengali personality still is a question mark. So I will end here and once again thank Dipanjan and congratulate the authors and the publishers for bringing this out at just the right time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharan. During the course of discussion, I would also like Mr. Das and Mr. Sikri to also chip in with their experience of Shahriar. You might have dealt with them. And if Mr. Mookerjee also remembers anything about Shahriar. I mean, yeah, Mr. Das, you remember something about Shahriar, I believe. Yeah. Now, can I? No, in the course of the discussion, yeah. Now, if I invite Dr. Ganguly to present his view.
Quite certain that Dipanjan has invited me, Hindol and Dipanjan have invited me because I consider myself to be a good friend of theirs. Yeah, not because I know much about Bangladesh, but because I'm a good friend of theirs, and I feel extremely intimidated because there are 4 former high commissioners who have served in Bangladesh with great distinction, who have left a lasting legacy because, and we, during our visits in Bangladesh, we have often heard of what they have left behind. We have a formidable mind, a former Minister of External Affairs, who's from whom I've learned a lot of West Asia and West Bengal as well. So therefore, I really don't know what to say, but exactly, I'll just make a few observations on the book. And I'm happy that Dipanjan has put together this panel because it's a Bangali heavy panel. And Dipanjan and me, we belong to Bikrampur, and I'm extremely proud. You belong to Hooghly. So there's a balance of East and West Bengal in this panel. And Smruti ji and Ambassador Pankaj Saran are by nature Bengalis because they know so much about Bengal. Okay. So it's a very imaginatively creative panel. Now, Ambassador Pankaj Saran made a very potent observation. He said what happens in Bangladesh doesn't remain in Bangladesh. And 48 hours ago, we saw often that not remaining in Bangladesh when NH12 was blocked for 30 hours and railway connectivity had to be stopped, transport had to be stopped, is just about 48 hours ago in Murshidabad. So we know the background to it, we know the effects of that, and this is not the first time that this is happening. It happened in 2019 after the CA was passed. One can have differences with the CA, but to block an arterial national highway on a pretext is something which is very dangerous, which has very sinister foreboding. Shahriar Kabir is in prison, but the Bengali Nobel laureates have not yet spoken up in the last 1.5 years. No Bengali Nobel laureate internationally acclaimed who have I wanted to provoke you, but they have not spoken up. So while we gather here today, we specially remember Shahriar Kabir. I met him when I was 21, and we struck a long friendship. I learned a lot from him, and we remained in touch till the time he was clamped into prison. And I think the reason why Shahriar Kabir is uncomfortable is because of this. This is a 2014 brochure. It's a pamphlet brought out, very beautifully, creatively written by Shahriar Kabir himself, a tribute to Jatindranath Mukherjee Bagha Jatin, one of the greatest Indian revolutionary nationalists. It was 100 years of the Battle of Balasore, and the Ghatok Dalal Nirmul Committee organized countrywide celebrations of that battle. In the sense, through this, Shahriar Kabir, the Ghatok Dalal Nirmul Committee, and that entire cross-section of Bangladesh also owned up the Indian freedom movement. And they spoke about a joint legacy. They spoke about a joint contribution, a joint fight against colonialism. So obviously today, forces that are dominating Bangladesh would not want this joint legacy to be perpetuated. And therefore, I think Dipanjan and Shahriar Kabir both have done a great service, and I would really urge Hindol, if this can be also translated into Bangla. You may not find publishers in Kolkata also, but obviously we are ready to help. And we are ready to also organize discussions specifically in Kolkata because this book is also meant for the blinkered and for the uninformed. You have turned it into a compendium. I think this is the first time that something of this kind has appeared in print. And this gives it in-depth. I mean, you have actually the details that you have gone through. For example, it's the first of its kind book with an in-depth information about 6 prominent, you have called them prominent, I can say infamous, like radical and degenerative. So infamous organizations, Islamic organizations of Bangladesh. And crème de la crème is this book has the most detailed expose of the Jamaat. And the Jamaat, as you have rightly described it in the book, opposed the creation of Bangladesh, collaborated with the Pakistan Army in 1971, considers India to be anti-Islamic and hostile to its interest, maintains close liaison with Pakistan, and its fundamentalist views against India is in sync with that of Pakistan and ISI. So naturally, the Jamaat wouldn't want, in spite of its camouflage that it has put up, a veneer of trying to become acceptable and respectable, it's going to go back to its old ways because it is antithetically to the essence, it stands antithetical to the essence of Bangladesh. And it's never going to change. It's just biding its time. And its undeclared policy is to decimate, though Smriti obviously is the foremost expert on the Jamaat. But its undeclared policy is to decimate all mainstream political parties. Hope the BNP realizes it. The third chapter, where you describe the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh as the fountainhead of Islamists, is a very important chapter. Because unlike the specialist, the lay reader, the general reader doesn't understand how entrenched, enmeshed Jamaat is in Bangladeshi society at all levels. It doesn't have popular support, but it has developed, it's further developing an octopus-like grip in institutions in Bangladesh. It has spawned its own network, and it survives on that network. Areas of influence, financial resources. You have also mentioned the Islami Bank of Bangladesh as the backbone of Jamaat. 14 financial institutions associated with the Jamaat, working mostly in the rural sector in the country, which has enabled the Jamaat to penetrate deep into Bangladeshi society, and which has actually
put up a challenge to that Bengali culture which Akbar has mentioned. That Bengali culture which is anathema to the Jamaat. I mean, obviously, Dipanjan and me, I take pride in saying that Dhaka Bikrampur was also the seat of Atisha Dipankar. And it is the first time it's in in November 2024 that Kathin Chivardhan was not held. The Buddhist Sangha took a decision not to hold the Kathin Chivardhan. In a country where you have Buddhists and where the Kathin Chivardhan ceremony is not held is indicative enough of the condition and situation of minorities. And I'm not even talking about the Bengali Hindus who are being attacked and who are being victimized. You have made a list of the Jamaat-backed organizations, which is very important. And it's really mind-boggling to see banks, hospitals, business entities, media, publications. The Jamaat has its own empire. And the coaching centers run by the Shibir. And these coaching centers are in good demand. And they attract a lot of students because they're very well organized. They provide a lot of information, a good amount of training, and a lot of it is free or subsidized. And therefore, it spawns a new network continuously, which is self-renewing. Your Annexure 1 and 2 is also extremely important. And I don't think, I have not come across, I'm not well read on Bangladesh, but little bit that I have read or written about Bangladesh, it's more from an emotional point of view, being a Bengali. Madrasa education in Bangladesh promoting radicalization, you have made a detailed a description of the organizations that are part of it. And you are a journalist, both of you, Shahriar, Kabir, and you. I think he would be better able to say, I appreciate whether that was your journalist has come to the fore, and you have made this section Bangladeshi radical group activities covered by the local media. It's a repository of information. And it gives an entire trajectory of the last so many years, nearly more than a decade you've done. And that is where I found this 28 September 2016 Jugantar report. New plan for blasts in Assam and West Bengal. Confessions of 6 JMB militants arrested in Kolkata on remand. So what happens in Bangladesh doesn't remain in Bangladesh. There's that entire report where they claim to be working to create engineer sabotage in West Bengal and Assam with the aim of creating a greater Bangladesh and with the aim of overthrowing the Hasina government. This was in 2016. So I think against that backdrop, you have also in detail spoken about the ideological leader of the degenerative Islamic organizations. And the way they have actually built up the organization, they have nurtured it, the way they have crystallized the ideology and also planned and fomented activism on the ground, that makes your book again stand apart. Now, just as an just by way of ending, you speak about the Amir of Hifazat-e-Islam, Junaid Babu Nagori. Hifazat activists under the leadership of Babu Nagori carried out widespread vandalism in Dhaka and Brahmanbaria in protest against the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Bangladesh. 19 people were killed in these 3 days of violence on March 26, 27, 28. And you have the Vice President of Hifazat today as the Chief Advisor on Religious Affairs, this AFM Khalid Hussain. So it just shows what kind of dispensation is there in Bangladesh, how they are governed and controlled. And Khalid Hussain was instrumental in also fomenting a visiting Prime Minister, an Indian Prime Minister. And we remember when even Pranab Babu had visited, there was the blast. At that time, it was in front of his hotel. Now, I think these are very important points that you have highlighted in your book. Hifazat was founded in 2013, and its 13-point demands that were made. It was clear that Hifazat had taken the field in Bangladesh to implement the political agenda of Jamaat-e-Islami, page 87. These are your own words. So, reading in between lines, one can, and among the 13-point demands that were made, compulsory Islamic education up to higher secondary level, opposing socio-cultural matters like sculptures or auspicious lamps, Mongol Pradip. So, what has happened to Chayanot, or what happened to Gurudev's house earlier? These are not isolated incidents. These are all connecting the dots. 2013, March 30th, 2013, Calcutta saw one of the largest mass rally organized by 16 Islamic outfits in support of the Jamaat against the war crime trials that were being held in Bangladesh at that time. This was in 2013. Exactly 11 years. 11 years to the date, nearly a few months here and there to the date of the so-called uprising, August uprising. Dilawar Hussain Saidi used to very infamously say, "Why should we feel sad when the Hindu brothers choose to leave our country? Do we mourn when we have indigestion and materials leave our bodies?" This was Dilawar Hussain Saidi. Now, what happens in Bangladesh doesn't remain, it is not confined to Bangladesh, was very clear in the March 2013 rally held by 16 Islamic organizations in Kolkata. Now, at the end, I just want to remind you, we have discussed this quite often. Vinaji has been very forceful, and she has also expressed a lot that many of us feel in her approach. It was in March, I think, March 2021, 29th March, Prime Minister's address. So right when Hifazat was undertaking that protest and the killing spree, the vandal and arson was going on, Prime Minister Modi said something very interesting in his address. He said, joining the freedom struggle for the independence of Bangladesh, it's a very interesting observation, was one of the first times that I took part in any movement. I must have been 20, 22 years old when I and many of my colleagues took part in the Satyagraha for the freedom of the people of Bangladesh in support of Bangladesh's independence. I was also arrested and jailed. So, and then he went on and he said, our goals are also shared, our challenges are also shared. We have to remember that while there are similar possibilities for us in trade and industry, there are also similar threats like terrorism. The school of thought and the powers that carry out such inhuman activities are still very much active. And we must also be careful and be organized to fight against them. So obviously, today, the forces that are active in Bangladesh and who want to gradually take control of the entire polity, the entire state of Bangladesh, are those forces which do not believe in this shared prosperity and shared challenges and a shared future. And as you have very rightly described the, should I stop? Is it the alarm? No. Okay, I have concluded. I just take a, as you have very rightly said, you have described the situation in your end note, and that aptly sums up the situation in Bangladesh. The rise of radical Islamists have severely undermined the communal fabric of Bangladesh. There has been a deeply concerning escalation in violence against religious and ethnic minorities, particularly following the ousting of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in 2024. And then you go on, Hindu, Buddhist, Christians, various tribal groups, Ahmadiyya communities have all faced increased communal strife. The noticeable decline in Durga Puja celebrations. I mean, Professor, may give any amount of figures, but there is a very clear decline. And obviously, people don't want to recognize that. The Islamic pressure during these festivities, administrative bias and restrictions on puja events, alongside the Buddhist community's decision to abstain from their Kathin Chivardhan festival due to rising communal threats since Dr. Yunus took power underscore the grave plight of minorities in the nation. Social media has emerged as a powerful tool in Bangladesh, fueling radical sentiments. Various radical Islamic scholars utilize these platforms to instill conservative Islamic values in their audiences through hateful and provocative rhetoric. Notably, platforms such as Facebook, YouTube have been exploited by radical Bangladeshi personalities to spread hatred against non-Muslims and to denounce secular values, thereby posing a threat to the liberal fabric of Bangladesh. So thank you very much, Dipanjan, for bringing this book out, for calling a spade, and also for generating a larger debate on the situation in Bangladesh and on the so-called uprising of August 2024, July 2024. Because, if in an uprising, one of the principal slogan is, Bharat Jader Mamar Badi, Bangla Chharo Taratari. How can that be a movement for the welfare of Bangladesh? It was given away in the first line, in the first instance itself. Anyway, one can go on and on, but I really hope this is translated in Bangla. We can actually have a discussion on this, how to go about it, and make this available to as many people as possible. And please do send a copy of this book to Professor Amartya Sen, Amitav Ghosh, Kaushik Basu, certainly, and Abhijit Bandyopadhyay. They must know what is happening in Bangladesh. They must also raise their voice and bring international attention to the plight of minorities in Bangladesh. Thank you so much.
Here, despite your personal hospital, as I understand. Last but not the least, your voice is most important because you have spent months and years in Bangladesh. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can speak.
Thank you, Dipanjan, for bringing out this particular book. I find this book, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, extremely interesting. Especially, I really like the last part where you have brought out quite a few things to prove that what is happening in Bangladesh. But I think when you look at the journey of Bangladesh historically, Mr. Akbar also has spoken about it. I think we need to also look at the process of Arabization, which started post 75 after Ziaur Rahman came to power, when the Middle East economy actually opened up. So that is why many of the people in Bangladesh also say that whenever it rains in Arab countries, the Bangladeshis also open their umbrellas. So that Arabization process was happening very simultaneously and in a very subtle manner. So we're speaking about the hijab in Bangladesh, because if you look at historically the dresses in Bangladesh, it is much more, even if you cover your head, it is, you use the sari. So you see a lot of influence of niqab, especially if you go to Chittagong. Almost I felt that it is much more resembled like Afghanistan. The entire face covered with a little bit. Some of the time I felt whether they can see or not. I took some pictures because I've never seen people wearing such kind of clothes in other part of Bangladesh. Though, of course, the Arabization has been dominant and has been very subtle. And during Jamaat-e-Islami's rule in Bangladesh, they in fact encouraged the Middle Eastern NGOs to come and open their office, especially when they're occupying this position of social welfare ministry by Mujahidi at that point of time. One also see the parallel kind of cultural space that has come up in Bangladesh. For example, the music, the importance that is given to the Muslim writers, parallel to the Hindu. I don't have to define it that way, but I look at it that way. For example, there is a group called Madina Musical Group. So if you listen to that music available in the YouTube, you see it's a very different kind of music which runs parallel to other Bengali musics. And you must have seen that during the Durga Puja. I think after the uprising, when the Durga Puja happened, the Jamaat people took over in one of the pandal and they started singing that particular thing. So this parallel cultural space is being created along with a parallel space for the literature. For example, even during Pakistan period, like Jamaat-e-Islami will always emphasize on Nazrul, irrespective of the fact that Nazrul's wife was a Hindu. But in contrast to Tagore, so the emphasis is much on Nazrul. So this emphasis is also because they want to build a kind of identity, which is a kind of Islamic identity, in a sense emphasizing on the Muslim culture, the Muslim literature developed by the Muslim personalities within Bangladesh, to say that there is parallel culture that is existent. And the thing is that Awami League has not given the kind of importance it was required to receive. So I think the Jamaat penetration into the politics is much more between 2001 to 2006, when they got that particular space. Ma'am was there at that point of time, High Commissioner. The agriculture ministry, imagine in a country which is an agricultural country, having the Ministry of Agriculture as well as social welfare. So what you can do to your network. You spoke of the network which exists in Bangladesh, especially the coaching centers. In fact, the recruitment policy is also very different. Recognize, identify a person who is very intelligent but poor and is not able to take the coachings. So they get that person to go to the coaching center, and as a result, when the person gets a job, he gives that 15%. You also have written about the Rokan, how much the charge of the Rokan is, and there is also professional fee. And you have brought out very nicely the Ibn Sina network. In fact, I spoke to some of the Ibn Sina nurses and doctors, and how they recruit, how they provide money to Jamaat, how they come into this mainstream of getting recruited. I think it is a kind of parallel empire. Nowhere you will see such kind of empire existing, financial empire. I really do not know whether Pakistan Jamaat actually has such kind of empire as you see in Bangladesh. Somehow it cannot be compared with anything. Now, when you look at the narratives which Jamaat is creating, especially the 24 uprising, is being called as second liberation. And you understand very why it is second liberation, because first liberation was a negative role, so second liberation was a very positive role. So when I spoke to someone, I asked them that why are you terming this as second liberation, because you had a negative role. So there was no reply. So it is very, very understandable to say that this is the second liberation, antithesis of what happened in 1971. And if you look at their apology on the 1971, they regret. I think one of the Ghulam Azam, when he came back in 1982, I think 84 Baitul Mokarram speech where he gave, he said, I regret. That thing about saying sorry is not there. You must have seen Safiqur Rahman's several statements after the government fell, saying very clearly that there was no war, so you prove that we played a negative role. So someone is mentioning that there are new groups. I think Ambassador Saran was mentioning there is new group, but new group within the Jamaat is not first time. AB Party is one of the new group which came out of Jamaat, now have aligned with Jamaat. Similarly, in 1984, there was this kind of, asking question, the new generation asking question to Jamaat, why should they take the burden of Jamaat, which played a very negative role in the Bangladesh's liberation? Since they are the new generation, so they should have new politics. In fact, at one point of time, when the war crime trial started, there was a bit of debate within Jamaat saying that, let us do away with the older generation of leaders and build the new party. And that point of time, Jamaat was in 2016, Jamaat was really thinking of reinventing itself, but also at the same time, it wanted the government to ban, because the ban will, in a sense, justify a creation of a new party. If you are not banning them, and if you are creating, that is what I understood when I was speaking to them. So if you are not banning them and the party reinvents itself as a new party, so that means you are accepting what you did in 71 is wrong, and you don't really have a space in Bangladesh's politics. So therefore, they waited for the ban, and intelligently the government did not ban them. They were deregistered, but no banning. So that actually, in a sense, made Jamaat to go on back foot. But in this narrative war, not just second liberation, they also have a group of freedom fighters organization. Some people may laugh that Jamaat having a group which is, group of freedom fighters parallel with the Awami League and all, but nevertheless, they had the audacity to come up with that, saying that, yes, we also fought, some of our associates also fought with in the liberation war. So therefore, this justification, even if you see the Jamaat website now, there is this, till now you have Motiur Rahman Nizami's picture, you have Kamrujaman's picture, everybody's picture is there. So they have not accepted what has happened. In fact, I think after the government fell, there was a particular person, I forget, I think ATM Azharul Islam was freed by the court in Bangladesh because he was sentenced to death and he was freed. What actually it means? It means that I think it will benefit Jamaat because they will say, see, Azharul Islam, once Hasina's government fell, he was freed by the judiciary. Judiciary did not find him guilty. So therefore, everybody who has been hanged by Hasina's government actually are not guilty. They are politically assassinated. That is the word they use. So I find that very, very interesting. I have not been able to understand if he was sentenced to death, why he was not given the death sentence and remained in jail for such a long time. And why is that the court did not dispose of his case? So therefore, by providing one release of one person may not be significant within Jamaat, but in the process delegitimizing the entire trial that happened and providing Jamaat a kind of narrative. As far as emergence of new group is concerned, and this infiltration, I think Anirban was speaking of infiltration. The government fell because of the infiltration of Jamaat. Look how the government fell and how people started declaring in Dhaka University, I'm the president of Chhatra Shibir, I am secretary of Chhatra Shibir. So they are very good at infiltration. So I'm not surprised, how the Jamaat, the infiltration policy has been there. But blatantly they infiltrated into the Awami League and undid the government. Yet Awami League never accepts that, that this was happening. And probably, because of overconfidence, I would say. On the Islamist group, very quickly, I will just make 1 or 2 points. One is that, the Islamist group, especially the ones which you have mentioned, not Jamaat-e-Islami, because it is a ulema political party, apolitical. Though when you ask them that how come you are apolitical, because some of the members of Jamaat-e-Islami are member of Islamic Oikojot. So how does that apolitical mix with political? So they don't have any answer. But other groups like, Ansarul Islam, the JMB, the Neo JMB, that kind of groups, I think Jamaat, when I spoke to them that why they have not been critical or why they have not come up in any kind of statement criticizing these people, they have been very, very silent. In fact, the new Islamist, especially this variety, they have a top-down approach. One is the pamphlet. If you read the pamphlet which was distributed in 2005 when the countrywide bomb blast happened, I happened to have a pamphlet of that. So they condemned everything. So Jamaat's methodology and the new Islamist, if one can put it that way, are very different. The Jamaat believes in a bottom-up approach, Islamize the society, capture the power. The Islamists, especially, the Ansarul Islam, the Neo JMB and others, they want a top-down approach. They capture the power and then Islamize. And you also have spoken about the Hizbut Tahrir. I think Anirban spoke about the madrasa-educated students. I think we should be much more careful, much more aware of the Hizbut Tahrir. It's very difficult to really, narrative-wise, even argument-wise, to win over the urban radicals. They're like us. You will never know them. Very, very convinced about them. So all the time, I think we keep on focusing on the madrasa student. No, I think we need to focus much more on this Hizbut Tahrir. Look at the cafe attack. Who are they? Not madrasa students. All of them are very educated. Studied in the elite school in Dhaka and went and studied in Malaysia. So I think that is something we need to look. And the delegitimization of Jamaat, I think from delegitimization, they have become legitimate, now fighting to win the Awami League voters. Like if you speak to Awami Leaguers, so they say that, our people are not going to vote in the next election. But those people who remain in the country, who have their security, their day-to-day activities very much dependent on who is controlling the area, they will vote. So the fight is that who is going to get the Awami League vote, Whether Jamaat will get the vote, in fact, they are very cleverly operating. I spoke to one of the person 2-3 days back about the Awami League voters. No, we are not doing anything. All the occupation of Ferighat, all this, Mastan politics is done by the BNP, but not by Jamaat. So they are clever, and it's very difficult to really pinpoint and see. Thank you so much.